Good afternoon, my name is Amanda Gagne. I teach at Penn Manor High School, and today I'm going to share some data that I've collected over the last couple weeks of school about my CP and Honors Veterinary Science course. A little background about this course. This course is in my Block 1 class. It is a class where CP and Honors students are in the same classroom, and I'm teaching them at the same time. Obviously, there's some differentiation going on there. I have some students who are gifted. I have some students who have IEPs. It's just a very hodgepodge mix of students, so I'm going to use this data to see, are my CP and my honors students grasping the same material. I also then am going to include some quantitative data that looks at observations of my use of test corrections. The scores I'm going to look at today do show the test correction scores, so I allow all my students to make test corrections. I think it's a really good technique for students to go back to their notes and see where they might have made mistakes or had some misunderstanding, and then clarify that in either one-on-one conversations with myself or by going ahead and talking to a peer, making that correction, or just rereading their notes, PowerPoints, whatever, and then going ahead and making those corrections. So the scores today will show a little bit of that as well, which can skew them a little bit. On the left side of my raw data, so I have students organized in honors and CP. I also put their gender there. There's not many males in this course in general. We're looking at 1, 2, 3 males in the honors section and 2 males in the college prep section. These are the first 3 quiz scores of the semester. So the prefix, suffix, roots was we looked at 60 prefix, suffix, and roots used in veterinary medicine, and students just took a vocabulary quiz. This was after us making flashcards, using those flashcards, them having to write a story or a case study using these prefix, suffix, and roots. So it was a lot of us using them in class that ended up becoming a quiz of them writing down the definition for the term. These tests are different, so the honors and CP level do have different words on their tests and different numbers of words on their tests. I think CP had 5 extra words. Looking at this data in general, I would say overall, like, my CP students didn't do the greatest compared to my college prep students, and that's just looking at the raw data. And I made red anything that was a 60, so like that lower, like DF range of students who got that as a percentage. Everything's out of 100 here. And overall, my college prep students did very well. And we see just from raw data, there's a lot more 90s, some 100, 80s. We're looking at the honor section, and we see those 58s, 68s, 50s. So without doing any graphing, without doing any manipulation of this data, I would assume that my college prep did better than my honors. Directional terms, we see overall they did pretty well. Directional terminology was very similar to their notes, where they had an animal and they had to label the different 3D parts of the animal. This is something that students might have had a little bit more familiarity with. I've had students who are taking other courses where they were familiar with these terms compared to the prefix, roots, and suffix, so that might be a little bit of why this test scores could have been higher here as well. And then my last one was large animal tool ID, and those are tools that these students are using in industry, so the overall test scores were pretty high on there, but they had to identify the tool as well as identify the purpose of the tool. Again, looking at that, I would think that CP and honors are very equal there. Their scores, there's a lot of hundreds on the college prep, there's a lot of hundreds on the honors track, and there's grades in the middle. I then went ahead and graphed this data, and I did keep the classes together. I didn't make 2 different lines for each class, which I probably should have done in hindsight, since I'm really trying to compare one to the other. But overall, we see that this prefix, suffix, root is just what I said. The scores are a little bit all over the place. Some students are up here at that 100. Some students are, again, at the 100, but don't necessarily. It kind of tapers down to that 50s, 60s, and above, where we look at the other 2 quiz scores, and there's a lot more hundreds on that tool ID, and even this directional term, the lowest we go here is a 75, 74, and then we come, or 72, come back up. So overall, the scores, some students are doing really well, and some students are not doing as great. But my goal was to compare these 2 these 2 levels, honors versus CP. So when I'm looking at the honors versus CP, my thoughts were correct, that in this prefix, suffix, and roots, my honors students' average was an 89.38 versus a 76.90 in the honors division. So these guys scored overall a better score in that. Their mode was higher. Their median was was higher as well. Well, their mode was the same. I apologize, and their median was the same. Versus when we look at the other two scores, the test scores are pretty close in the average. So these are only about 2 points off, and here being just under 4 points off. So overall, in the directional terms and large animals, these two sections are grasping the material and demonstrating that knowledge to me in a similar way. We see that the median was a little bit higher in the large animal tool than we do here in the CP, but the mode across the board was pretty even too, a little bit higher here in that large animal than in this too. And as I'm looking at the median mode, I can see that the middle score of these are all within a couple numbers of each other besides that prefix, suffix, and roots quiz, which is telling me that students are scoring within the same range of scores. And when I'm looking then again at the most frequent number, those are also within the same range, both being in the A category for grading. I did then look at test corrections and observations I make during test corrections when they're going on. So students are able to take the quiz, I grade it immediately, and then I hand it back to them, and they're able to make corrections that day. We're in a block schedule, so normally ends up being 30 to 40 minutes that they have to go ahead and make those corrections, and they can work with each other, they can ask questions with each other, they can ask questions with me. So interesting things I see during that time is CP students take the time, they go back through their notes, they come and normally ask questions more frequently, or I should say ask questions more of each other frequently, and they are pulling back out PowerPoints and such that we've gone over. Compared to the honor students, where I typically see them, they normally come have a conversation with me and they want to know why they got this question wrong and why their points were taken off, not necessarily what the correct answer is. So a little bit different of approach there. Honors, when we hand their quizzes in the same block, where CP might take them back home for the day and then bring them back the next day, which is totally acceptable in my classroom. I just want them to really think about and process what information and what content they're not understanding at that moment. CP students typically use this option the most. I would say that their scores are not necessarily bad, but they're the ones that are working and trying to understand that content, and honor students typically need it more frequently. And when we come back here, especially that prefix, suffix, roots, I would say most of these guys that have these red did go ahead and do text corrections, but it was desperately needed more here than it was on this college prep. So those are just some observations I made, and then I organized this into a concept map so I can kind of group these by different ideas that I saw throughout the observations. I can branch off of these even more if I wanted to, but I don't have a ton of data on how students are utilizing that time more than what I have shared here. Thank you so much for listening.